was 210 BC, and the moment before battle. The Chinese emperor's army is ready to charge. The soldiers, thousands of them, are lined up row after row, as far as the eye can see. They are armed with crossbows, battle axes, swords, and daggers. The archers are in the front rows. They are closest to the enemy and make easy targets. Yet they do not have helmets on or wear armor to protect themselves. Armor is only for important officers whose lives are more valued. Further back in the line, a general stands in a chariot. He is about to beat his drum. This will be the signal to attack, but the signal never comes. The army will never attack. The soldiers are not real. They are the size of real soldiers, but they are made of terracotta, a strong kind of clay. The soldiers are more than 2,000 years old. For almost all of that time, they lay hidden about 20 feet underground in China. The map below shows the spot where the army was buried. Until 1974, nobody knew the army was there. Then, one spring day, some farmers were digging a well. Their shovels hit something hard. Was it rock? No. To their surprise, they dug up the clay head of a man. It looked very old. Who put it there? And why? The farmers had no idea. Okay, number 1. How far underground was the army? How far underground was the army? So how far underground was the army hidden? Soon, archaeologists came to take a look at the head. Archaeologists study very old objects so that they can learn about the past and the way people lived long ago. The archaeologists hoped to find the rest of the clay man. They ended up finding much more than that. Since 1974, more than 2,000 soldiers have been dug up. There may be as many as 6,000 more. Workers must assemble the soldiers from many small pieces of clay. It's like working with a 3D jigsaw puzzle. Beside the clay army, other things have also been uncovered, like bronze geese, clay acrobats, and 2 bronze war chariots. Who buried all of these treasures and why? It's an amazing story. Today, China is the 4th largest country in the world, with a population of more than 1 billion people. Beijing, seen here, is the capital of China and home to over 22 million people. But before 221 BC, there was no such country as China. Instead, the area had 7 different kingdoms. They were all at war with one another. The strongest kingdom was called Qin, which sounds similar to the word China. The king of Qin was only 13 years old when he came to power, but he grew to be a fierce ruler. The king of Qin conquered the other kingdoms one by one. By the time he was 37, he ruled over a huge empire. The Qin king now made everyone call him first emperor and almighty of the universe. That sounded important enough. Okay, so before 221 BC, how many different kingdoms were in China? Number 2. Before 221 BC, how many different kingdoms were in China? Indeed, the emperor did do some great things. He was afraid of enemies outside his empire, so he built the first Great Wall of China to protect the lands. It was almost 3,000 miles long. He didn't start the wall from scratch. Existing walls were connected and then extended. The emperor also feared enemies inside his empire. Many people were loyal to their old kingdoms. The emperor put a stop to that. He made everyone speak and write the same language. He made everyone use the same money and system of weights. He forced people to be part of his new empire. There was one enemy, however, that the emperor could not defeat. That enemy was death. More than anything, the emperor wanted to live forever. According to legend, there were mysterious islands off the coast of China. They were called the Eastern Islands. The people there knew how to make a magic potion. It kept them alive forever. Many times the emperor went to sent search parties out to sea, but they never found the Eastern Islands or the magic potion. Number 3. What did the emperor want more than anything? What did the emperor want more than anything? With no way to stop death, the emperor did the next best thing. He had 700,000 workers build him a magnificent tomb. He was only 13 years old when the work began. The tomb was in the shape of a pyramid. It was even bigger than the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The ceiling of the main room was supposedly covered with jewels. It was meant to look like the sky. Below it were rivers in the shape of the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. The rivers were made of mercury, a poisonous liquid. They flowed past models of the emperor's palaces. The ancient Chinese believed that a person's spirit lived on after death. In fact, they thought that life after death was a lot like life on Earth. So the emperor filled his tomb with furniture, games, boats, chariots, and beautiful silk robes. He wanted to make sure his spirit had everything for a happy afterlife. The emperor wanted to protect his spirit from tomb robbers. First, he had the giant tomb hidden under a man-made hill. Then, a mile from the tomb, he ordered 1,000 workers to make an army of clay soldiers. The emperor believed that once this army was buried, the soldiers would magically come alive. They would protect the emperor from enemies forever and ever. So here was his tomb, and then a little further away he did the soldiers. From every part of the empire, hundreds of craftsmen came and set up workshops near the emperor's tomb. They used clay from the nearby Mount Li. It took more than 10 years to make the soldiers. It is believed that there are about 8,000 soldiers in all. The army was finished by the time the emperor died in 210 BC. Okay, number 4. How long did it take to make the army? So how long did it take to make the clay soldiers? How long did it take to make the army? The The clay soldiers, wooden chariots, and clay horses were placed in 3 pits close to one another. A 4th pit has also been found, but it is empty. The largest pit, Pit 1, is longer than 2 football fields. It contains the main forces of the army, about 6,000 soldiers. Okay, so this is Pit 1. And you can see the size. Here's Pit 1, Pit 2, Pit 3, and Pit 4. Pit 2 is much smaller and filled with charioteers and their teams of horses. The cavalry troops would have backed up the foot soldiers from Pit 1. The clay horses are Mongolian ponies, not very big, but very strong. Their manes were trimmed short so they wouldn't get caught in the harnesses. Archaeologists believe that the charioteers may have once stood in real wooden chariots. You can see that the charioteers' hands look as if they're holding reins. In 1980, 2 bronze chariots were found not far from the clay army. The chariots were only half the size of the real ones, but in every other way, the ones in the photo below is exactly what the war chariot would have looked like. Okay, question 5. Which pit has the horses and chariots? Which pit contains the horses and chariots? Pit 3 is the smallest. It contains about 70 soldiers. Archaeologists think that Pit 3 represents the Army headquarters. The officers are in a U-shaped group as if discussing plans for the next battle. Today, the pits are open to the public. Visitors can watch groups of workers as they uncover more figures. Of course, the Emperor of Qin never meant for anyone to see his army. After the soldiers were placed in the pits, they were covered with a wooden roof. 10 feet of dirt was shoveled on top of them so that no one could tell what lay underground. For 2,200 years, the thousands of clay soldiers remained a secret. Then, in 1974, those modern-day farmers began to dig a well, and the whole world found out about the true wonder of the ancient world. From a distance, the clay soldiers look the same, like a giant-sized toy army. Yet every soldier is clearly an individual. Amazingly, no 2 soldiers are alike. Their faces are different. Some are old, some are young. Some look tired. Some look like they can't wait for the battle to start. Their hairstyles are also different. In ancient times, Chinese men wore their long hair in fancy buns and top knots. Their uniforms were different. The uniforms are exact copies of what real soldiers wore. The archers and foot soldiers were the lowest ranking soldiers, so they had the plainest uniforms. The generals, of course, wore the most elegant uniforms. Some of their caps had feathers. Sometimes their shoes turned up at the toes. Their armor was patterned in small iron rings that looked like fish scales. Here you see a computer image of a clay general. It shows how he must have looked when he had just been made. Every single soldier in the emperor's army was painted with bright colors. So were the horses. Now, most of the soldiers have only tiny traces of paint left. Once in a while, a soldier is found that still has bright paint in places. But when it is dug out, most of the paint curls up and peels off. Scientists are trying to create a special varnish to brush over the painted figures to hold the paint in place. Today, craftsmen near the pit make copies of the soldiers. This helps archaeologists learn more about how the original army was made. Modern craftsmen have much better kilns than those used in ancient times. Kilns are ovens that bake clay until it hardens. Yet no copies ever come out as hard or shiny as the originals. Why? Nobody knows. It's a mystery. And an even bigger mystery is what lies inside the emperor's tomb. Nobody knows the answer because the tomb has never been opened. Nor does the Chinese government plan to do so anytime soon. Work will not start until archaeologists are sure that the tomb can be opened without damaging any treasures inside. As for the emperor's body, according to historical records, it rests in a heavy bronze coffin. Like the ancient Egyptians, the Chinese believed a dead person's body needed to be preserved as a home for the soul. In ancient times, the custom was to dress the body of someone important in a suit made from hundreds of pieces of thin jade. Jade was considered more precious than gold. It was also supposed to have the power to keep the body from decaying. The first emperor died when he was 49 years old. 3 years after his death, peasants rose up against the empire. One of their leaders started a new royal family. Yet now millions of people come to the first emperor's burial place. They visit the covered pit to see the clay soldiers. So in some ways, the emperor of Qin got his wish. He lives on in the memory of all who see his amazing hidden army. Okay, number 6, last question. Name one way the soldiers are different from each other. Okay, so talked about 3 or 4 different ways that they're different. You just need to name one way the soldiers are different from each other.